Family, today is Wednesday, February 11th, 2026, and we are stepping into an ADOIC moment of inner healing. This is not a casual prayer. This is not background noise while you scroll. This is a divine intervention for the places in you that have been silently bleeding, the emotions you learned to manage but never truly healed, and the confusion that has been clouding your discernment. Some of you have been strong for too long. You've held it together while your heart was fractured. You've smiled through pressure, functioned through pain, and kept moving while your soul was crying out for relief. But hear this clearly: God does not just want you productive. He wants you whole. Healing is not weakness. Healing is warfare. Healing is restoration of authority. Today, we are confronting emotional fatigue, soul wounds, trauma stored in memory, and confusion that has hijacked clarity. We are declaring that what hurt you will no longer define you. What broke you will no longer control you, and what overwhelmed you will no longer dominate your decisions. This prayer is designed to rebuild your emotional strength, recalibrate your inner world, and restore clarity to your mind so you can move forward without distortion. As we pray, the Holy Spirit will begin to untangle what has been knotted for years. Peace will replace inner noise. Strength will rise where weariness lived. Clarity will cut through confusion. You are not here by accident. You are here because this prayer is timed for your healing. So don't rush. Don't multitask. Position your heart. Open your spirit. And get ready, because in the next few moments, we are about to release an ADOIC PR that will heal the inside and empower the outside. Inner healing is the restoration of authority over your emotions, not the suppression of them. Because anything you silence without healing will eventually surface with greater force and demand control in ways you did not intend. Many people believe strength means ignoring pain, burying emotions, or spiritualizing wounds so they never have to confront them. But suppression is not dominion, it is delay. Authority means you are no longer ruled by emotional reactions, triggers, or internal chaos, because you understand what is happening within you and you have reclaimed the power to govern it. When emotions are suppressed, they leak into decisions, relationships, tone, posture, and timing. But when emotions are healed, they become servants instead of masters. God never designed emotions to dominate the soul, but He also never intended for them to be denied. Emotions are indicators, not dictators. They reveal where authority has been challenged, where wounds have interrupted alignment, and where unresolved experiences have taken up residence in the inner world. Inner healing is the process by which the Holy Spirit enters those places, not to erase memory, but to remove emotional charge so memory no longer has power. When healing takes place, the same experience that once triggered fear, anger, or insecurity no longer controls your response, because the authority has been restored to your spirit. Many believers are spiritually anointed, but emotionally fragmented. And fragmentation always weakens authority. You cannot rule effectively in the outer world when the inner world is in rebellion. Emotional wounds fracture focus, distort perception, and sabotage discernment. That is why people repeat cycles they prayed to escape, because prayer without healing leaves the root intact. Authority is not loudness, dominance, or intensity. Authority is stability. It is the ability to remain centered, clear, and decisive even when pressure is applied. Inner healing restores that center. When emotions are unhealed, they create false narratives. Fear convinces you that danger is always imminent. Rejection tells you that people are against you. Shame whispers that you are disqualified. Anger convinces you that aggression equals strength. These emotions are not evil, but when they are wounded, they become weapons used against you. Healing dismantles those internal lies and replaces them with truth, clarity, and emotional regulation. Regulation is not numbness, it is mastery. Authority over emotions means you can feel deeply without being driven blindly. You can acknowledge grief without surrendering to despair. You can recognize anger without allowing it to rule your mouth. You can experience disappointment without abandoning purpose. Healing does not remove emotion, it removes emotional tyranny. The healed soul is not emotionless, it is ordered. Many people confuse emotional expression with emotional healing. Crying is not always healing. Talking is not always healing. Venting is not always healing. Healing occurs when the source of the pain is confronted, understood, and released under divine truth. Otherwise, emotions simply recycle themselves. Inner healing restores authority by closing open doors in the soul that were created through trauma, neglect, betrayal, or prolonged stress. These doors allow emotions to enter and exit uncontrollably. Healing restores boundaries. When authority is restored, you no longer apologize for your emotions. and you no longer weaponize them. You take responsibility for them. Responsibility is a sign of rulership. A king does not deny what exists in his territory, but he governs it. Inner healing gives you back the throne of your inner life so emotions no longer overthrow leadership. This is why healing is not optional for those called to lead, build, influence, or advance. Unhealed emotions will always demand compensation. They will look for relief through distraction, control, perfectionism, overworking, withdrawal, or unhealthy attachments. Healing removes the need for compensation because the wound is no longer bleeding. Authority returns when the soul no longer seeks relief in substitutes. This is why some people cannot rest, cannot trust, cannot wait, and cannot receive because their emotions are ruling instead of responding. God heals emotions so you can make decisions from wisdom instead of wounds. Wounded emotions make reactive choices. Healed emotions allow strategic movement. Authority is the ability to pause, assess, and choose rather than explode, retreat, or sabotage progress. Healing gives you emotional intelligence aligned with spiritual discernment. When these two operate together, clarity becomes natural rather than forced. Inner healing also restores authority over time. Emotional wounds slow movement, create hesitation, and produce internal resistance. People delay obedience not because they lack faith, but because emotions are unhealed. Fear negotiates with calling. Insecurity questions assignment. Pain resists vulnerability. Healing removes internal resistance so obedience becomes lighter and movement becomes smoother. The enemy does not need to destroy you if he can destabilize your emotions, because instability erodes authority quietly. Healing is spiritual warfare because it shuts down access points the enemy uses to influence thought patterns and reactions. When emotions are healed, accusations lose power, triggers lose grip, and old voices lose authority. You no longer fight yourself while trying to move forward. Inner healing restores your ability to respond instead of react. Reaction is emotional reflex rooted in past pain. Response is intentional action rooted in present clarity. Authority lives in response. Healing rewires the inner system so your nervous system, thought life, and spirit come back into alignment. Peace is not passivity. Peace is internal order. When authority is restored over emotions, your prayers change, your posture changes, your communication changes, and your presence carries weight. You stop needing to prove strength because strength is internalized. You stop demanding validation because identity is settled. You stop fearing exposure because wholeness has replaced fragmentation. This is why inner healing is foundational, because everything flows from the inner world outward. And when the inner world is healed, authority naturally manifests in decisions, relationships, leadership, and destiny. And the soul finally rests in governance rather than survival, functioning from alignment rather than defense, standing from wholeness rather than endurance, moving forward with clarity, stability, and dominion still expanding within. Emotional strength is built when trauma no longer dictates your reactions. Because as long as past pain is controlling present responses, strength is only an illusion maintained by adrenaline, defense mechanisms, and survival patterns. Many people confuse emotional toughness with emotional strength, but toughness is learned endurance under pressure, while strength is inner stability that remains intact even when pressure increases. Trauma-trained reactions are automatic, subconscious, and protective. But they are not authoritative. They are responses formed in moments where safety, power, or control were threatened. And while they may have once preserved you, they are not designed to govern your future. Trauma speaks first when it is unhealed. It reacts before wisdom can respond. It tightens the chest, accelerates the heart, sharpens the tone, and floods the mind with assumptions rooted in memory rather than reality. This is why certain situations feel larger than they are. Why some conversations trigger disproportionate reactions, and why emotional responses sometimes surprise even the person expressing them. Strength begins when the nervous system no longer confuses present moments with past danger. Healing retrains the body, soul, and mind to recognize safety, truth, and timing again. Unhealed trauma programs emotional reflexes. It teaches the soul how to brace, guard, attack, withdraw, or numb itself without conscious thought. These reflexes become habits. And habits become identity if left unchecked. People begin to say, "That's just how I am," when in reality it is how they were trained by pain. Emotional strength is not the absence of feeling, it is the absence of emotional hijacking. When trauma no longer dictates reactions, emotions become information rather than instruction. Many people live in reaction loops, repeating the same emotional responses in different environments, believing the problem is always external. Healing reveals that the real battle is internal regulation. Emotional strength allows you to pause between stimulus and response. And in that pause, authority is restored. Trauma removes the pause. Healing returns it. That pause is where discernment lives, where wisdom operates, where choice becomes possible again. Trauma narrows perception. It convinces the mind that threat is constant and trust is dangerous. Emotional strength expands perception. It allows you to see situations as they are, not as they remind you of something else. When trauma dictates reactions, people overinterpret tone, personalize neutral behavior, anticipate rejection, and prepare defenses unnecessarily. This constant vigilance is exhausting, and exhaustion masquerades as strength until the body and soul begin to collapse under its weight. Healing does not erase memory, but it removes emotional dominance from memory. The event may still be remembered, but it no longer commands physiological and emotional reactions. The body no longer responds as if the danger is happening again. This is where true strength begins, when the past loses its power to control the present. Emotional strength is freedom from emotional time travel. Trauma often teaches people to survive by control. Control of environments, people's schedules, emotions, or outcomes. When control is threatened, reactions intensify, anger spikes. Anxiety rises, withdrawal activates. Healing loosens the grip of control and replaces it with trust, discernment, and flexibility. Strength is not rigidity. Strength is adaptability rooted in safety. When trauma no longer dictates reactions, you no longer need to dominate situations to feel secure. Many spiritual people pray for strength but resist healing, not realizing that healing is the pathway to strength. Trauma distorts spiritual interpretation. It turns caution into fear, boundaries into walls, discernment into suspicion, and passion into defensiveness. Healing clarifies spiritual perception so emotions no longer misinterpret spiritual signals. Emotional strength allows faith to operate without interference from fear-based reactions. Unhealed trauma also distorts communication. People react instead of listen. They defend instead of understand. They respond to perceived threats rather than actual words. Healing slows communication down. It allows clarity, curiosity, and compassion to replace emotional reflex. Emotional strength shows up in tone, pacing, posture, and presence. It is quiet confidence rather than loud reactivity. When trauma dictates reactions, people live in emotional anticipation, bracing for what might happen rather than responding to what is happening. This creates anxiety, restlessness, and mental fatigue. Healing brings the nervous system back into the present moment. Emotional strength lives in the now, not in rehearsed outcomes or imagined threats. The present becomes safe again. Trauma-trained reactions often feel justified, especially when they once protected you. Healing challenges that justification without invalidating the pain. It separates the experience from the identity. You are not weak because trauma affected you, but you cannot remain ruled by what once wounded you. Emotional strength emerges when you no longer need to prove you are okay by overreacting, overexplaining, or overperforming. When trauma loses control over reactions, leadership capacity increases, decision-making improves, relationships stabilize, authority becomes consistent. Strength becomes sustainable. You are no longer drained by emotional spikes and crashes. Energy is conserved. Focus sharpens. Peace becomes accessible without effort. Healing teaches the body that it no longer needs to stay in survival mode. Muscles relax. Breath deepens. Thoughts slow. Emotional strength is embodied, not just believed. It lives in how the body responds to stress, how quickly equilibrium is restored after disruption, and how calmly challenges are approached. Trauma reacts to protect. Healing responds to lead. Emotional strength is leadership of the inner world. When trauma no longer dictates reactions, emotions align with truth instead of memory, with wisdom instead of fear, with clarity instead of confusion, and the soul moves from survival into stability, from defense into dominion, from reaction into intentional movement guided by authority that no longer belongs to the past, but is anchored firmly in the present moment, fully aware, fully grounded, fully capable of standing steady without being driven by what once wounded the heart and shaped the reflexes of a soul that is now being retrained for strength rather than survival. Clarity returns when soul wounds are healed at the root, not managed at the surface, because anything addressed superficially will continue to distort perception beneath conscious awareness. Many people attempt to think their way into clarity, analyze their way out of confusion, or pray only for direction without allowing healing to take place in the inner world where distortion was formed. Clarity is not primarily an intellectual issue, it is a soul condition. When the soul is wounded, perception bends, interpretation skews, and judgment becomes compromised even when information is accurate. Unhealed soul wounds act like filters over reality. They color how situations are interpreted, how people are perceived, and how choices are evaluated. A wounded soul does not see clearly because pain refracts truth. Rejection convinces the mind that distance equals abandonment. Betrayal interprets caution as hostility. Shame misreads correction as condemnation. These interpretations feel real, but they are rooted in unresolved pain rather than present truth. Managing symptoms may control behavior temporarily, but healing the root restores perception permanently. Many people function with high levels of spiritual language and activity while carrying deep soul wounds that quietly influence every decision. They fast, pray, declare, and decree, yet remain confused about timing, relationships, and direction. This confusion persists because the wound is still speaking. The voice of pain competes with the voice of wisdom. Healing quiets the internal noise so clarity can emerge without strain. Surface management focuses on behavior modification. Root healing focuses on internal alignment. Behavior can be disciplined, but perception cannot be forced. You cannot command clarity while tolerating unresolved wounds. Clarity flows naturally when internal conflict is resolved. Healing aligns emotions, thoughts, and spirit so they no longer send competing signals. When alignment returns, discernment sharpens. Soul wounds often originate in moments where the inner world felt unsafe, unseen, or unsupported. In those moments, the soul learned how to interpret reality in ways that preserved survival. These interpretations may have been necessary then, but they become liabilities later. Healing revisits those moments not to relive pain, but to reinterpret them through truth. When interpretation changes, clarity follows. Confusion is often misdiagnosed as lack of information. In reality, confusion frequently results from internal fragmentation. One part of the soul wants to move forward while another part is guarding against past harm. This internal contradiction produces hesitation, second guessing, and inconsistency. Healing integrates these fractured parts so the soul can move as one. Clarity is the byproduct of integration. Unhealed wounds also distort spiritual discernment. People attribute emotional discomfort to spiritual warning or mistake fear for wisdom. Healing refines discernment by separating emotional residue from spiritual insight. When wounds are healed, intuition becomes trustworthy again. Decisions are no longer driven by emotional memory, but by present awareness and divine guidance. Managing wounds at the surface often looks like coping strategies, rationalizations, and spiritual bypassing. People stay busy to avoid stillness. They quote scripture to silence discomfort. They intellectualize pain instead of confronting it. These strategies create the illusion of control but do not produce clarity. Healing requires courage to slow down and allow truth to surface where pain has been hidden. Root healing restores the soul's ability to interpret reality accurately. It removes emotional static from the signal. When the static is gone, guidance becomes clearer, timing becomes discernible, and priorities reorder themselves without force. Clarity does not have to be chased, it emerges. Many people are confused about purpose, not because purpose is unclear, but because wounds have clouded identity. When identity is wounded, purpose feels threatening, movement feels risky. Healing stabilizes identity so purpose no longer feels dangerous. Clarity follows stability. Soul wounds also affect how people interpret silence. Silence becomes rejection. Delay becomes denial. Correction becomes attack. Healing redefines these interpretations so silence can be processed as reflection, delay as preparation, and correction as alignment. Clarity is restored when interpretations are healed. When wounds are unhealed, the mind oscillates between extremes, overthinking and avoidance, urgency and paralysis. Healing calms the nervous system, allowing the mind to rest in the present. A regulated nervous system is essential for clarity. Peace is not emotional numbness. It is internal order that allows perception to function properly. Root healing also restores clarity in relationships. People stop projecting past pain onto present connections. Communication improves because assumptions decrease. Listening deepens because defenses soften. Clarity in relationships reduces emotional friction and increases trust. Many people attempt to manage confusion by seeking constant confirmation, advice, and reassurance. Healing reduces dependency on external validation because internal clarity strengthens. Confidence grows not from certainty of outcome, but from trust in perception. When perception is healed, you trust yourself again. Clarity returns gradually as healing deepens. It is not always dramatic, but it is consistent. Decisions feel lighter. Direction feels steadier. The need to force answers diminishes. Healing creates space for wisdom to operate without resistance. When the soul is healed at the root, Clarity becomes the natural state rather than a rare experience. Thoughts align. Emotions settle. Spirit leads. The noise quiets. The fog lifts. Direction emerges. Movement becomes intentional rather than reactive. Choices reflect truth rather than fear. The soul no longer argues with itself. Inner conflict resolves into inner agreement. Clarity becomes the atmosphere of the inner world, sustained not by effort, but by wholeness that now governs perception, interpretation, discernment, and response from a place of healed awareness that no longer confuses pain with truth or memory with present reality, but stands steady in alignment where the inner world is no longer divided but unified, clear, and responsive to guidance without distortion. God heals the inner world so the outer life can function without distortion, because whatever remains broken internally will eventually express itself externally. No matter how disciplined, spiritual, or successful a person appears to be, the inner world is the command center of behavior, decision-making, relationships, and perception. When the inner world is fractured, the outer life becomes inconsistent, unpredictable, and exhausting to maintain. Healing is not cosmetic improvement, it is structural restoration that allows life to flow without constant correction or damage control. Many people invest heavily in managing external outcomes while neglecting internal alignment. They adjust habits, routines, environments, and appearances, yet remain internally unstable. This instability leaks into communication, leadership, timing, and judgment. God heals internally first because external transformation without internal healing produces strain. You can build structures externally, but if the foundation is cracked, everything above it requires constant repair. The inner world shapes how reality is experienced. Thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and memories interact continuously to interpret events. When these elements are wounded or misaligned, interpretation becomes distorted. People react to perceived threats that do not exist, misread intentions, and overcorrect situations unnecessarily. Healing recalibrates the inner world so interpretation aligns with truth rather than fear, history, or insecurity. Distortion often shows up as inconsistency. A person may be confident one moment and insecure the next, decisive today and hesitant tomorrow, open in one relationship and guarded in another. This is not always hypocrisy. It is fragmentation. Healing integrates the inner world so responses become consistent across environments. Consistency is a sign of internal wholeness. God does not heal the inner world to make people comfortable. He heals it to make them effective. Effectiveness requires clarity, emotional regulation, discernment, and stability. These qualities cannot be sustained by willpower alone. They flow naturally from a healed inner world. When healing takes place, effort decreases and flow increases. Many external struggles are symptoms, not causes. Relationship conflict, burnout, indecision, overreaction, and procrastination often originate from unhealed internal wounds. Addressing symptoms without healing the source produces temporary relief, but not lasting change. God targets the root because he is interested in transformation, not maintenance. The inner world also determines capacity. Unhealed pain consumes emotional energy. It occupies mental space. It drains focus. When healing occurs, that energy is released and redirected toward creativity, productivity, and purpose. The outer life expands when the inner world is no longer congested by unresolved issues. Distortion in the outer life often manifests as misalignment between intention and outcome. People want peace but create conflict. They desire connection but push others away. They pursue purpose but sabotage momentum. Healing closes the gap between intention and outcome by aligning the inner world with conscious desire. God heals internally so that choices are made from wisdom rather than wounds. Wounded choices are reactive, defensive, and short-sighted. Healed choices are intentional, strategic, and grounded. The outer life reflects the quality of internal decision-making. Healing upgrades that quality. The inner world also governs boundaries. Unhealed individuals often struggle with boundaries, either erecting walls or allowing overexposure. Healing clarifies where boundaries are needed and where openness is safe. This clarity improves relationships and reduces conflict in the outer life. Spiritual authority is also rooted in the inner world. A person cannot operate in consistent authority externally while internally fragmented. Authority flows from alignment. Healing restores alignment, which strengthens authority without effort. Presence carries weight when the inner world is settled. Distortion also affects timing. Unhealed impatience pushes prematurely. Unhealed fear delays unnecessarily. Healing restores sensitivity to timing. The outer life becomes more synchronized with purpose because internal pressure no longer dictates movement. Many people attempt to change their outer life through discipline alone. Discipline is valuable, but it cannot replace healing. Discipline manages behavior. Healing transforms motivation. When motivation is healed, behavior follows naturally. The outer life stabilizes because it is no longer being forced. God heals the inner world so that success does not amplify brokenness. Without healing, success magnifies insecurity, pride, fear, or emptiness. With healing, success becomes a platform for service rather than a stage for compensation. The outer life can expand safely when the inner world is stable. Healing also restores enjoyment. Many people function efficiently but joylessly. They achieve goals but feel empty. Healing reconnects the inner world to pleasure, gratitude, and presence. The outer life becomes something to experience, not just manage. Distortion often causes people to live in extremes, overworking then collapsing, overgiving then withdrawing, trusting blindly then shutting down. Healing brings balance. Balance is evidence of internal regulation. The outer life becomes sustainable rather than cyclical. God heals the inner world because he is interested in wholeness, not performance. Performance can impress others, but wholeness sustains the individual. When the inner world is healed, the outer life no longer requires constant explanation, justification, or repair. Life flows with less friction. The healed inner world produces clarity, consistency, and calm that naturally shapes the external environment. People respond differently. Opportunities align more easily. Decisions feel lighter. The outer life becomes an expression of internal truth rather than a cover for internal conflict. Healing simplifies life by removing internal opposition. When the inner world is healed, the outer life no longer carries the burden of unresolved pain. Relationships become clearer. Work becomes more focused. Rest becomes possible. Movement becomes intentional. Authority becomes natural. The outer life reflects the order of the inner world, functioning without distortion, without constant resistance, without internal sabotage, moving in alignment with purpose, clarity, and stability that originate from a soul restored to wholeness, where internal harmony now governs external expression, and life no longer has to compensate for what was once broken but now stands whole, aligned, and functioning from a healed core that quietly but powerfully shapes every outward experience. What was stored in memory but never healed must be confronted and released, because memory without healing becomes a silent authority that governs reactions, beliefs, and expectations long after the event has passed. Memory is not just a record of what happened, it is a container for emotional charge, interpretation, and meaning. When experiences are stored without resolution, they do not remain neutral. They influence perception, decision-making, and behavior from the subconscious, shaping life in ways that are often unrecognized but deeply felt. Unhealed memories are not passive. They speak through triggers, emotional responses, bodily sensations, and thought patterns. A tone of voice, a facial expression, a delay, or a familiar circumstance can activate an old memory and produce a reaction that feels immediate but is rooted in the past. The present moment becomes hijacked by stored emotion. Confronting memory is not about reliving pain. It is about removing its authority over the present. Many people avoid confronting memory because they equate remembrance with weakness or regression. They fear that revisiting pain will undo progress. In reality, unexamined memory continues to operate unchecked, while confronted memory loses power. Healing does not require reliving the experience emotionally. It requires acknowledging its impact honestly and allowing truth to reinterpret it. Stored memory often carries conclusions that were formed in moments of vulnerability. Conclusions such as, I am not safe, I am not valued, I must stay guarded, or I must control outcomes to survive. These conclusions may have protected the individual at the time, but they become limitations later. Healing confronts these conclusions and replaces them with truth. When the conclusion changes, the memory loses its grip. Memory that is not healed becomes the lens through which new experiences are filtered. People respond not to what is happening, but to what it reminds them of. This creates repetitive patterns, attracting similar dynamics, conflicts, and disappointments. Healing breaks these cycles by releasing the emotional residue stored in memory. Confronting memory requires courage and honesty. It involves acknowledging pain without minimizing it and recognizing its influence without allowing it to define identity. Many people spiritualize avoidance, convincing themselves that faith means never looking back. True healing allows the past to be addressed without being lived in. Release does not come from denial, it comes from resolution. The body often remembers what the mind tries to forget. Unhealed memory manifests physically through tension, fatigue, Chronic stress and emotional sensitivity. Healing integrates mind and body by allowing stored emotional energy to be released. When memory is healed, the body relaxes and returns to regulation. Memory also influences trust. Betrayal stored in memory produces suspicion. Abandonment stored in memory produces anxiety. Rejection stored in memory produces withdrawal. Healing releases these emotional imprints so trust can be rebuilt based on present reality rather than past injury. Releasing memory does not mean forgetting the lesson. It means the lesson no longer carries pain. Wisdom remains, but emotional charge is gone. This distinction is critical. Healing preserves discernment while removing fear. Memory becomes a reference point, not a trigger. Many people attempt to outrun memory through activity, success, or distraction. These strategies may provide temporary relief, but memory remains intact until confronted. Healing requires stillness, reflection, and willingness to face what was buried. Release happens when the truth is allowed to surface without judgment. Unhealed memory also distorts identity. People begin to see themselves through the lens of what happened to them rather than who they are. Healing restores identity by separating experience from essence. You are not the trauma, the loss, the failure, or the betrayal. Memory may record the event, but it does not define the person. Confronting memory often reveals grief that was never processed. Grief over what was lost, what never happened, or what was taken. Healing allows grief to move rather than stagnate. Stagnant grief hardens into bitterness or numbness. Released grief restores emotional flow. Memory stored without healing also affects self-talk. Internal dialogue becomes shaped by past criticism, neglect, or humiliation. Healing interrupts these internal narratives and replaces them with truth. When memory is healed, the inner voice changes. Release is an act of authority. It is the decision to no longer allow the past to occupy present territory. This does not excuse harm or rewrite history. It simply removes emotional ownership from the event. Authority is reclaimed when memory no longer dictates emotional response. Healing memory also restores clarity. Confusion often arises when old memories interfere with present perception. Releasing memory clears mental space and sharpens discernment. Decisions become cleaner because they are not influenced by unresolved emotion. Many people resist release because they fear losing the story. The story becomes part of identity. Healing does not erase the story, it redeems it. The story becomes testimony rather than trauma. Power shifts from the event to the individual. Confrontation of memory is not a one-time act, but a process. Layers surface gradually. Each release restores additional freedom. Emotional capacity increases. Peace deepens. Presence strengthens. When memory is healed and released, emotional reactions soften. Triggers lose intensity. The past becomes quieter. The present becomes fuller. Energy previously bound to memory becomes available for growth, creativity, and connection. What was stored without healing must be confronted, not to reopen wounds, but to close them properly. Release does not diminish strength, it proves it. When memory no longer carries pain, it loses authority. The present regains sovereignty. The future opens without restriction. Life is no longer negotiated with the past, but lived from freedom, where memory is acknowledged, healed, and released, no longer governing thought, emotion, or expectation, but resting in its proper place as history rather than a ruler, allowing the soul to move forward unburdened, regulated, and restored to clarity and strength without the weight of unresolved experience, still exerting silent control over reactions and choices that now belong fully to the present moment. Wholeness is a spiritual weapon that repositions you for dominion and forward movement, because fragmentation weakens authority while integration strengthens it. The enemy does not always attack destiny directly. Often the strategy is to divide the inner world so focus, confidence, and clarity are diluted. A fragmented soul expends energy managing internal conflict, leaving little strength for advancement. Wholeness gathers scattered parts back into alignment, restoring power that was lost through division. Many people attempt to move forward while internally split, one part desiring progress and another part resisting because of fear, pain, or past failure. This internal opposition creates stagnation. Wholeness removes resistance by bringing agreement within the soul. When the inner world agrees, movement becomes effortless. Dominion begins internally before it manifests externally. Spiritual authority is amplified through wholeness. Authority requires coherence. When thoughts, emotions, will, and spirit are aligned, commands carry weight. Fragmentation weakens follow-through and consistency. Healing integrates these dimensions so authority flows without interruption. Wholeness is not perfection, it is alignment. It is the condition where nothing inside you is working against what you are called to do. Many people pray for breakthroughs while ignoring fragmentation. They ask for acceleration while carrying unresolved inner conflict. Acceleration without wholeness creates instability. God restores wholeness first so advancement does not collapse under its own weight. Dominion is sustained by internal order, not external momentum. Wholeness stabilizes identity. A fragmented identity shifts based on environment, approval, or pressure. Wholeness anchors identity internally so external circumstances no longer dictate self-perception. When identity is stable, authority is consistent. Consistency is a hallmark of dominion. Fragmentation also disrupts focus. Attention is divided between managing emotions, suppressing pain, and navigating purpose. Wholeness consolidates focus. Energy is no longer scattered. Forward movement accelerates because power is no longer leaking through unresolved internal fractures. Wholeness is a weapon because it disarms internal sabotage. Many delays are self-generated, not consciously, but through internal misalignment. Healing removes these obstacles. When self-sabotage loses power, progress becomes natural. The enemy exploits fragmentation by triggering unhealed parts at critical moments. Wholeness closes access points. Triggers lose influence. Emotional reactions soften. Decisions become intentional. Dominion increases as reactions decrease. Wholeness restores confidence without arrogance. Fragmentation creates insecurity masked as control or overcompensation. Wholeness produces quiet confidence grounded in self-awareness and truth. This confidence attracts opportunity and repels intimidation. Forward movement requires trust in self and timing. Fragmentation erodes trust. Wholeness rebuilds it. When you trust your discernment, movement becomes decisive. Hesitation fades. Momentum builds. Wholeness also restores authority over time. Fragmented individuals are often trapped in cycles, revisiting the same issues repeatedly. Wholeness breaks cycles by resolving their source. Forward movement becomes linear rather than circular. Many people attempt to dominate externally while lacking internal dominion. External authority without internal wholeness is exhausting. Healing restores internal governance so external leadership becomes sustainable. Wholeness strengthens spiritual perception. Fragmentation creates noise that interferes with discernment. Healing quiets the noise. Guidance becomes clear. Direction sharpens. Movement aligns with purpose rather than pressure. Wholeness also enhances resilience. Fragmented individuals fracture further under stress. Wholeness absorbs pressure without breaking. This resilience supports long-term advancement. Forward movement often requires letting go. Fragmentation clings to what feels familiar even when it is limiting. Wholeness releases attachments rooted in fear. Freedom increases. Expansion follows. Wholeness aligns intention with action. Fragmentation creates contradictions between what is desired and what is done. Healing resolves these contradictions. Action flows naturally from intention. Dominion is exercised through presence. Fragmentation weakens presence. Wholeness strengthens it. When presence is strong, influence increases without effort. Wholeness also restores emotional regulation. Unregulated emotions derail progress. Healing brings balance. Balance supports sustained movement. Many people underestimate the power of wholeness, viewing it as passive or internal. In reality, wholeness is strategic. It positions you ahead of opposition. It removes leverage from the enemy. Wholeness simplifies life. Fragmentation complicates it. Simplicity accelerates movement. Complexity delays it. Wholeness restores alignment between calling and capacity. Fragmentation limits capacity. Healing expands it. Forward movement becomes scalable. Wholeness is not an endpoint. It is a posture. It allows continuous growth without internal collapse. Dominion increases as wholeness deepens. When the inner world is whole, decisions are clearer. Reactions are calmer, authority is steadier, and movement is intentional. Life advances without internal resistance. Progress no longer feels forced. Expansion feels natural. The soul moves as one. Power consolidates. Direction sharpens. Authority stabilizes. Forward movement accelerates because nothing inside is pulling backward. Nothing is divided. Nothing is resisting alignment. And wholeness becomes the silent force that repositions you ahead of opposition, above distraction, and into sustained dominion where advancement is no longer interrupted by internal fracture, but propelled by integration, clarity, and authority that continue to strengthen as the soul remains unified, grounded, and fully aligned with purpose, moving steadily forward without fragmentation, slowing momentum, or compromising strength. Grace and peace be multiplied unto you on this powerful Saturday, 7th of March, 2026. Today is not just another day on the calendar. It is a divine appointment. This is your moment to step out of exhaustion and into empowerment. This is your hour to transition from striving to reigning. You have battled, you have built, you have endured. And now heaven declares it is time to rest, but not as a victim of weariness, rather as a ruler who understands authority. Today's atomic prayer is Resto-I-T-H-A-O-Y, Reiko Verwai and Rasto Rei-I-O Ein. There is a difference between collapsing from fatigue and resting from a finished work. One is driven by depletion, the other is governed by dominion. When God rested on the seventh day, he did not rest because he was tired. He rested because he was triumphant. And today you are stepping into that same dimension. You are not retreating, you are recovering. You are not backing down, you are being built back up. Some of you have been in relentless warfare, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. You have been fighting battles no one saw. You have been carrying weights no one measured. But this Saturday, the Spirit of the Lord is shifting you into supernatural restoration. The fatigue that has tried to cloud your clarity will lift. The pressure that has tried to compress your purpose will break. The fragmentation will be reversed. What was drained will be replenished. What was fractured will be fortified. Rest is not weakness, it is strategy. Recovery is not delay, it is divine design. Restoration is not optional, it is covenant. When you rest with authority, you silence anxiety, you command peace, you recalibrate your spirit, you realign your mind, you reinforce your body, you declare to every assignment of burnout and breakdown, you will not override my calling. This prayer is going to reset your internal atmosphere. It will dismantle the spirit of overexertion. It will command divine energy into your nervous system. It will speak wholeness over your sleep, clarity over your thoughts, and strength over your tomorrow. You will not enter the next week depleted. You will enter it restored. So prepare your heart, open your spirit, position your faith, because today we are not just asking for rest. We are legislating restoration. We are not just pausing. We are possessing peace. We are not merely lying down. We are rising renewed. This is your Saturday of sacred recovery. This is your hour of supernatural restoration. This is your atomic prayer. Rest is a position of power, not a sign of weakness. In a world that glorifies exhaustion and applauds overexertion, we have been conditioned to believe that constant movement equals significance. But the kingdom of God does not reward burnout, it rewards obedience. There is a holy rhythm to dominion, and that rhythm includes rest. When you understand who you are and whose you are, you no longer strive for validation through endless activity. You begin to move from identity, not insecurity. You begin to operate from authority, not anxiety. Many people rest because they are forced to. They collapse under pressure. They withdraw because their bodies can no longer carry the strain their minds have normalized. But there is another dimension of rest, the rest chosen by those who understand spiritual law. This is the rest of a ruler. This is the rest of someone who knows that they are not the source of their own supply. When you rest from that revelation, you are making a declaration. I trust God enough to pause. I trust heaven enough to disengage. I trust divine order enough to stop striving. Powerful people know when to sit down. Authority is not loud. Authority does not panic. Authority does not scramble. Authority speaks, and it is so. When you rest with authority, you are not abandoning your assignment. You are protecting your anointing. You are guarding your clarity. You are preserving your strength for the battles that actually require your engagement. Rest becomes an act of discipline. It becomes a refusal to let chaos dictate your pace. There are those who fear rest because they equate stillness with stagnation. They believe that if they stop moving, they will fall behind. But when you are aligned with divine purpose, you cannot miss what is meant for you. What God has ordained for your life is not threatened by a pause. In fact, many breakthroughs are activated in seasons of stillness. When your mind quiets, strategy surfaces. When your body resets, resilience returns. When your spirit slows down, sensitivity to divine instruction increases. Rest is a boundary. It is a statement to the world that you will not be consumed by endless demand. It is a signal to your nervous system that you are safe. So many people live in a constant state of internal alarm. They wake up already tense. They sleep lightly as though bracing for impact. But rest with authority silences the alarm. It recalibrates your internal atmosphere. It shifts you from survival mode into sovereign mode. Weakness is surrendering to fear. Weakness is allowing pressure to dictate your decisions. But rest, when it is intentional, is strength under control. It is confidence in motion, or even confidence in stillness. When a leader rests, it is not because they lack vision. It is because they trust the vision enough to step back and see it clearly. When a warrior rests, it is not because they have lost courage. It is because they understand that stamina wins wars. There is a difference between quitting and resting. Quitting is rooted in defeat. Resting is rooted in wisdom. Quitting says, I cannot. Resting says, I will, but not at the cost of my well-being. Rest honors the temple of your body. It honors the capacity of your mind. It acknowledges that you are human, yet empowered by a supernatural source. You were never designed to operate disconnected from replenishment. The most powerful move you can make in moments of pressure is to refuse panic. Panic accelerates depletion. Rest restores perspective. When you step back, breathe deeply, and reset your focus, you are exercising dominion over your environment. You are saying that circumstances will not control your internal state. You are choosing peace as a weapon. You are choosing composure as a strategy. Rest also requires courage. It takes bravery to step away when everyone else is running. It takes maturity to recognize your limits and honor them. It takes faith to believe that God is working even when you are not visibly striving. But that faith is the very thing that strengthens you. You begin to understand that outcomes are not sustained by your constant interference. They are sustained by alignment. When you rest with authority, you release the illusion that everything depends on you. You dismantle the false narrative that says you must carry every burden alone. You allow divine exchange to occur, your wariness for his strength, your tension for his peace, your confusion for his clarity. In that exchange, you do not lose ground. You gain vision. Rest is also restoration in motion. While you are still, unseen processes are unfolding. Cells repair, hormones rebalance, thoughts reorganize, emotions stabilize. Spiritually, revelation downloads, creativity reignites, discernment sharpens. You emerge not weaker but wiser, not fragile but fortified, not behind but better prepared. Authority understands timing. There are moments to advance and moments to anchor. There are seasons to build and seasons to breathe. If you attempt to harvest without allowing the soil to replenish, you eventually exhaust the ground. The same is true for your life. Continuous output without intentional input drains your capacity. But when you rest, you enrich your soil. You prepare for greater yield. Resting with authority means you do not apologize for prioritizing your well-being. You do not explain your boundaries to those who benefit from your burnout. You understand that sustainability is strength, longevity is wisdom. Consistency requires cycles of renewal. You choose to live beyond adrenaline. You choose to operate beyond urgency. You choose to function from alignment. This kind of rest transforms your posture. You stop reacting impulsively. You respond intentionally. You listen more deeply. You discern more clearly. You move with precision instead of pressure. You begin to notice that your words carry more weight because they are not rushed. Your decisions carry more impact because they are not forced. Your presence carries more authority because it is grounded in peace. When you truly understand that rest is a position of power, you stop seeing it as an interruption. You see it as preparation. You see it as alignment. You see it as obedience. You recognize that the strength you need for tomorrow is cultivated in the stillness you embrace today. You realize that restoration is not optional. It is foundational. And in choosing to rest with authority, you are not stepping away from your calling. You are stepping deeper into it. Recovery is strategic. God restores what warfare tried to drain. Every battle extracts something. Every season of pressure pulls on your energy, your focus, your emotions, your confidence. Even when you win, there is expenditure. Even when you stand strong, there is output. Warfare, whether spiritual, mental, or emotional, is costly. It demands vigilance. It requires strength. It calls for resilience. But the kingdom of God is not built on endless depletion. It is built on divine exchange. Heaven never allows you to fight without also providing restoration. Many people assume recovery is accidental, something that happens if you are lucky enough to have a quiet season. But recovery in the spirit is intentional. It is strategic. It is orchestrated by God. When you have endured a prolonged fight, there is a divine process that must follow. You cannot remain in combat mode indefinitely. Your nervous system was not designed for perpetual alert. Your mind was not created to carry unrelenting tension. Your spirit was not meant to operate in constant strain. Recovery becomes a sacred reset. Warfare tries to drain clarity. It clouds your thinking. It introduces doubt. It magnifies threats. After a season of intense pressure, you may notice that your thoughts feel heavier, slower, more cautious. That is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that you have been engaged. Recovery restores clarity. It recalibrates perception. It sharpens discernment. When God restores, he does not merely refill what was emptied. He refines what was tested. Warfare also attempts to drain joy. Prolonged battles can make you serious, guarded, even suspicious of ease. You become accustomed to scanning for the next problem. You struggle to relax because you expect interruption. But strategic recovery dismantles hypervigilance. It retrains your system to receive peace. It reminds you that not every moment is a fight. Not every sound is a threat. Not every pause is danger. Joy begins to return quietly, steadily, like light filtering back into a room after a storm. There are emotional costs to endurance. You may have shown strength outwardly while privately carrying fatigue. You may have been the strong one for others, the intercessor, the strategist, the problem solver. But even leaders require restoration. Even warriors need renewal. Strategic recovery acknowledges the invisible toll. It allows you to process what you survived instead of rushing into the next assignment. It gives your heart permission to exhale. God's restoration is never random. It is precise. He restores confidence where fear tried to settle. He restores courage where intimidation tried to shrink you. He restores faith where disappointment tried to erode your expectation. Recovery is not just about feeling better. It is about standing stronger. It is about emerging from battle with greater wisdom than when you entered. Warfare may have targeted you, but it also trained you. Recovery integrates the lessons without leaving the wounds open. When you do not allow strategic recovery, you risk carrying battle residue into peaceful seasons. You respond to calm as though it is chaos. You misinterpret silence as absence. You anticipate loss when stability is present. But when you submit to divine restoration, you clear the residue. You cleanse the atmosphere of your soul. You reset your internal environment so that peace feels natural again. Strategic recovery also rebuilds capacity. Battles stretch you. They demand more than you thought you had. They reveal strengths you did not know existed. But after expansion, there must be reinforcement. Muscles that are stretched must be nourished. Minds that have been intensely engaged must be refreshed. Spirits that have interceded deeply must be replenished. God restores capacity not only to where it was, but often beyond it. What tried to exhaust you becomes the very process that enlarges you. There is a temptation to equate constant movement with momentum, but sometimes the most powerful momentum is built in stillness. Recovery gathers fragmented energy. It consolidates scattered focus. It aligns scattered thoughts. When warfare has pulled you in multiple directions, restoration brings you back to center. It reminds you who you are outside of the conflict. It reconnects you to identity beyond the fight. Recovery is also relational. Warfare can isolate you. It can make you withdraw emotionally even when surrounded by people. You protect yourself, you minimize vulnerability. But strategic restoration softens what hardened. It reopens what closed. It allows connection to feel safe again. God restores not only strength, but tenderness. He restores your ability to trust, to laugh, to hope without bracing for impact. When God restores what warfare tried to drain, He does not merely replace energy. He upgrades resilience. You become less reactive. You become more measured. You learn which battles deserve your attention and which require your silence. You develop discernment about where to invest your strength. Recovery teaches you economy. It teaches you stewardship of your emotional and spiritual resources. There are seasons where you fought simply to maintain ground. You were not advancing, you were defending. That requires tremendous stamina. Strategic recovery honors that effort. It does not dismiss survival as insignificant. It recognizes that holding your position was victory. And now, as restoration unfolds, you regain the creativity and vision that defense temporarily suspended. Recovery also restores your sense of time. Warfare compresses time. Everything feels urgent. Everything feels immediate. You operate in crisis rhythm. But restoration expands time again. You breathe more slowly. You think more clearly. You make decisions from wisdom instead of urgency. Your body shifts out of survival chemistry and back into sustainable strength. God's restoration is layered. It touches your sleep. It regulates your thoughts. It stabilizes your emotions. It renews your spiritual sensitivity. You begin to notice subtle improvements, deeper rest, lighter thoughts, calmer reactions. These are not small changes. They are evidence of strategic recovery. They signal that what tried to drain you did not define you. Recovery is not retreat. It is reinforcement. It is preparation for the next level of influence. It ensures that when you step forward again, you do so from wholeness rather than depletion. You move with authority rather than adrenaline. You act from clarity rather than exhaustion. What warfare attempted to steal becomes the catalyst for greater depth, greater wisdom, greater strength, because God restores what warfare tried to drain. You must close cycles before you enter new assignments. There is a divine order to progression. Movement in the kingdom is not random, it is sequential. Every season carries its own lessons, responsibilities, and revelations. When a season ends, it requires acknowledgement. It requires intentional closure. Without closure, you risk carrying unfinished emotions, unresolved thoughts, and lingering attachments into spaces that demand fresh focus. You cannot fully step into what is next while emotionally entangled with what was. Many people attempt to accelerate into new opportunities without properly concluding the previous chapter. They change environments but carry the same mindset. They shift locations but transport the same internal clutter. They accept new assignments while still processing old disappointments. This creates internal conflict. You appear to be advancing externally, but internally you are divided. Closure is not about forgetting, it is about integrating and releasing. Every cycle serves a purpose. Some cycles stretch you, some refine you, some break patterns, some reveal strengths you did not know you possessed. But once the purpose of a cycle is fulfilled, it must be honored and concluded. If you attempt to prolong what has already served its assignment, you delay growth. There are relationships that were seasonal, lessons that were temporary, challenges that were transitional. When you refuse to close the cycle, you confuse transition with permanence. Closing cycles requires courage because it demands honesty. You must evaluate what worked and what did not. You must confront where you overextended, where you tolerated less than you deserved, where you operated from fear instead of faith. This reflection is not self-condemnation, it is self-awareness. It allows you to extract wisdom from experience. Without extraction, repetition occurs. You find yourself reliving similar patterns in new settings because you never concluded the previous lesson. Unclosed cycles create emotional residue. Residue influences perception. It shapes how you interpret new opportunities. If your last assignment ended in betrayal, you may approach the next one with suspicion. If your previous effort resulted in exhaustion, you may approach the next opportunity with reluctance. When cycles remain open, they speak into your future. They whisper doubt. They amplify insecurity. Closure silences those echoes. To close a cycle, you must release expectations tied to it. You must let go of how you thought it would end. You must surrender the narrative you imagined. Sometimes closure does not look like victory, it looks like acceptance. It looks like acknowledging that something fulfilled its role and is no longer meant to continue. That acknowledgement frees energy. It clears space. It restores focus. New assignments require undivided attention. They demand creativity, clarity, and courage. If your emotional bandwidth is still occupied by unresolved issues from a previous season, you cannot give your best to what is emerging. Divided focus diminishes impact. You become reactive instead of proactive. You spend time replaying past conversations instead of building present strategies. Closure creates mental margin. There are also spiritual implications to unfinished cycles. Every season carries spiritual weight. There are prayers prayed, battles fought, sacrifices made. When you transition without closure, you risk carrying spiritual fatigue forward. But when you intentionally close a cycle, you mark the end of that spiritual assignment. You give thanks for the grace that sustained you. You release the burdens attached to that season. You prepare your spirit for new instruction. Closure often involves forgiveness. You may need to forgive others for misunderstandings, disappointments, or conflicts. You may need to forgive yourself for mistakes or missed opportunities. Forgiveness is not approval of what happened, it is liberation from its hold. Without forgiveness, cycles remain open through emotional attachment. You replay scenarios. You rehearse grievances. You stay connected to what hurt you. Forgiveness cuts that connection. Another dimension of closure is gratitude. Even difficult seasons carry hidden gifts. They build resilience. They expose character. They sharpen discernment. When you take time to express gratitude for what you learned, you transform pain into preparation. Gratitude reframes the narrative. It shifts you from victimhood to victory. It ensures that the cycle concludes with empowerment rather than regret. Closing cycles also requires boundaries. You may need to reduce contact with environments that pull you backward. You may need to redefine access. You may need to say no where you previously said yes out of obligation. Boundaries protect the transition. They guard the new season from interference. Without boundaries, old patterns re-enter through familiar doors. There is a temptation to rush closure because you are eager for what is next. But hurried closure is incomplete closure. You must allow yourself to process. You must give yourself permission to grieve what is ending, even if it was imperfect. Grief does not mean you want to return. It means you are acknowledging significance. Honoring significance ensures healthy transition. New assignments often require a different version of you. They require expanded capacity, refined focus, elevated discipline. If you cling to old identities tied to previous cycles, you limit growth. Closure allows identity to evolve. It permits you to shed outdated definitions. It makes room for maturity. You cannot carry yesterday's labels into tomorrow's responsibilities. There are moments when God signals that a cycle has ended. The grace that once made things effortless begins to feel strained. The clarity that once guided you becomes clouded. The passion that once fueled you diminishes. These signals are not failures, they are indicators. They point to transition. Ignoring them prolongs discomfort. Responding to them initiates renewal. When you close a cycle properly, you carry wisdom forward without carrying weight. You remember lessons without reliving pain. You step into new assignments lighter, clearer, stronger. You are not haunted by what was because you have resolved it. You are not distracted by unfinished business because you have completed what was yours to complete. Entering a new assignment is not merely about opportunity, it is about readiness. Readiness is cultivated through closure. It is formed in reflection, forgiveness, gratitude, and boundary setting. When you have done the work to close what was, you approach what is coming with confidence. You are not divided. You are not conflicted. You are aligned. You must close cycles before you enter new assignments because unfinished chapters compete with new beginnings. They demand attention. They drain focus. They distort perception. But when cycles are properly concluded, they become foundations rather than distractions. They support growth rather than hinder it. And as you stand at the threshold of what is next, you do so with clarity of mind, steadiness of heart, and the freedom that comes from knowing that what needed to end has ended. Divine restoration rebuilds mind, body, and spirit simultaneously. It is not fragmented. It is not partial. It is not limited to one dimension of your existence. When God restores, He restores holistically. He understands that you are an integrated being. Your thoughts affect your body. Your emotions influence your spirit. Your spiritual condition shapes your perception. You cannot truly recover if only one part of you is addressed while the others remain strained. Many people attempt selective restoration. They focus on physical rest but ignore mental exhaustion. They pursue spiritual renewal but neglect emotional healing. They try to think positively while their bodies are overwhelmed and their spirits are depleted. But divine restoration moves through every layer. It recalibrates your nervous system. It renews your thought patterns. It strengthens your spiritual sensitivity. It aligns your entire being with peace. Your mind carries the weight of interpretation. Every experience passes through it. Warfare, stress, disappointment, pressure, they leave imprints. Thoughts become repetitive. Worry becomes habitual. Negative anticipation becomes automatic. Divine restoration interrupts these cycles. It rewires internal dialogue. It silences intrusive narratives. It replaces distorted perception with clarity. When your mind is restored, you no longer interpret every situation through fear. You regain discernment. You regain focus. Your body also keeps record. Stress does not disappear simply because you pray. It often lodges in muscle tension, shallow breathing, fatigue, and restlessness. Sleepless nights accumulate. Adrenaline spikes become normalized. You forget what it feels like to be fully relaxed. Divine restoration touches your physiology. It slows your breathing. It regulates your heartbeat. It releases stored tension. It allows your body to shift out of survival mode and into sustainable strength. Your spirit, too, can experience fatigue, not because it is weak, but because it has been engaged intensely. Intercession requires energy. Faith under pressure requires resilience. Believing through uncertainty requires depth. Over time, spiritual engagement without renewal can feel heavy. Divine restoration refreshes your spirit. It reignites passion. It renews intimacy. It restores sensitivity to divine guidance. You begin to hear clearly again. You begin to sense direction without strain. When restoration moves simultaneously through mind, body, and spirit, alignment occurs. Alignment produces stability. You are not spiritually inspired, but physically exhausted. You are not mentally sharp, but emotionally unstable. You are not physically rested, but spiritually distant. Instead, there is cohesion. Your thoughts support your peace. Your body supports your focus. Your spirit supports your courage. Fragmented healing creates imbalance. You may feel spiritually uplifted during moments of worship, but return to anxious thinking afterward. You may improve your physical habits, but remain emotionally reactive. Divine restoration refuses fragmentation. It addresses the root, not just the symptom. It asks deeper questions. What thought patterns need to shift? What emotional wounds require attention? What spiritual disciplines need renewal? The mind must be guarded because it shapes expectation. If your mind remains conditioned by previous trauma, it will anticipate repetition. Even in peaceful seasons, it will brace for disruption. Divine restoration retrains expectation. It teaches your mind to anticipate goodness without fear. It strengthens your ability to remain calm under pressure. It reduces internal noise so that wisdom can surface. The body must be honored because it carries you through every assignment. Ignoring physical signals is not spiritual maturity. It is misalignment. Fatigue, tension, headaches, digestive discomfort, these are often indicators that your system needs restoration. Divine restoration encourages rest, hydration, movement, nourishment. It invites you to steward your physical vessel as sacred, not expendable. The spirit must be nourished because it is your connection to divine source. When your spirit is neglected, everything else feels heavier. Decisions feel harder. Motivation feels weaker. Discernment feels blurred. Restoration in the spirit renews joy. It deepens faith. It restores confidence in unseen support. You begin to feel anchored again, not drifting. Simultaneous restoration also rebuilds resilience. When your mind is clear, your body is regulated, and your spirit is strong, challenges do not destabilize you as easily. You respond rather than react. You evaluate rather than panic. You engage rather than withdraw. Restoration increases your threshold for stress without increasing your tolerance for dysfunction. There are seasons when one area demands more attention than others. Perhaps your body is exhausted. Perhaps your mind is overwhelmed. Perhaps your spirit feels distant. But divine restoration ensures that attention to one area does not neglect the others. As your body rests, your mind is quieted. As your spirit is renewed, your emotions are steadied. As your thoughts are clarified, your physical tension decreases. Divine restoration also rebuilds identity. Stress can distort how you see yourself. You may begin to define yourself by what you survived rather than who you are called to be. Restoration recenters identity in truth. It reminds you that you are not your exhaustion. You are not your mistakes. You are not your setbacks. You are whole, even if temporarily weary. When mind, body, and spirit are restored together, creativity returns. You think expansively again. You imagine possibilities again. Your energy supports execution. Your spirit supports vision. There is harmony between intention and action. There is unity between belief and behavior. Restoration is not instantaneous transformation. It is progressive renewal. Each day brings small recalibrations. A clearer thought, a deeper breath, a steadier emotion, a stronger sense of peace. These small shifts accumulate. They build momentum toward wholeness. You begin to recognize that you are not merely recovering, you are being rebuilt. Divine restoration rebuilds your internal infrastructure. It strengthens foundations that may have weakened under pressure. It reinforces boundaries. It sharpens discernment. It stabilizes emotion. It energizes the body. It renews the spirit. You are not patched temporarily. You are reconstructed intentionally. When restoration is complete in all three dimensions, you operate differently. You are not easily provoked. You are not quickly drained. You are not perpetually anxious. There is steadiness in your voice. There is clarity in your thinking. There is vitality in your body. There is depth in your spirit. This simultaneous rebuilding prepares you for sustainable impact. It ensures that your future assignments are approached from wholeness rather than fragmentation. It establishes rhythm instead of chaos. It creates balance instead of imbalance. It positions you not merely to survive, but to thrive from a place of integrated strength where mind, body, and spirit move together in harmony under divine restoration. Authority over anxiety begins with intentional rest. Anxiety thrives in environments of constant stimulation, relentless pressure, and unexamined thoughts. It feeds on urgency. It multiplies in exhaustion. It grows louder when the mind is overcrowded and the body is overstimulated. Many people attempt to silence anxiety through sheer willpower, but authority is not established by force. It is established by alignment. When you choose intentional rest, you are not escaping responsibility. You are reclaiming control over your internal atmosphere. Anxiety often feels like loss of control. Your thoughts race ahead of you. Your heart beats faster without permission. Your body prepares for danger that may not exist. You anticipate outcomes that have not occurred. But intentional rest interrupts that cycle. It slows the momentum of fear. It creates space between stimulus and response. In that space, authority is formed. You begin to notice that thoughts are not commands, they are suggestions. You gain the power to evaluate them instead of automatically obeying them. Intentional rest is not passive inactivity. It is deliberate disengagement from unnecessary stimulation. It is choosing silence over noise. It is choosing reflection over reaction. It is choosing stillness over scrambling. When you rest intentionally, you send a signal to your nervous system that you are safe. Safety recalibrates physiology, it lowers adrenaline, it stabilizes breathing. It reduces the internal alarm that anxiety depends on. Anxiety convinces you that if you stop moving, something will fall apart. It whispers that constant vigilance is the only way to prevent disaster. But authority recognizes that not every thought deserves attention. Not every scenario requires rehearsal. Not every possibility needs to be explored. Intentional rest teaches your mind to distinguish between real responsibility and imagined catastrophe. There is a difference between preparation and obsession. Preparation is strategic, obsession is compulsive. Anxiety blurs that line. It disguises worry as wisdom. It disguises rumination as responsibility. But when you practice intentional rest, you sharpen discernment. You learn to ask whether your thoughts are productive or repetitive. You learn to release mental loops that produce no solutions. Authority over anxiety also requires rhythm. When your life lacks rhythm, your mind compensates by overworking. It attempts to solve everything at once. It scans constantly for threats. Intentional rest establishes rhythm. It creates predictable pauses. It introduces boundaries around work, information, and engagement. Those boundaries protect your mental clarity. Rest does not mean avoidance. It means regulation. You are not denying challenges exist. You are refusing to let them dominate your internal state. Regulation begins when you notice your breathing. When you slow it down, you signal calm. When you sit quietly and allow your thoughts to settle, you weaken anxiety's grip. Authority grows in those quiet moments. It strengthens each time you choose calm over chaos. Many people underestimate the physical component of anxiety. Sleep deprivation intensifies worry. Excessive caffeine amplifies restlessness. Continuous digital exposure overstimulates the brain. Intentional rest addresses these practical realities. It prioritizes sleep. It limits unnecessary noise. It introduces moments of solitude. These choices may seem small, but they create cumulative impact. Anxiety often operates through anticipation. It projects negative outcomes into the future and then reacts to them as though they are present. Intentional rest anchors you in the present moment. It reminds you that you are here, now breathing, alive. It narrows your focus to what is actually in front of you rather than what might happen. Presence weakens projection. Authority also involves self-talk. The words you repeat internally shape your emotional state. If your internal dialogue is critical, fearful, or catastrophic, anxiety strengthens. Intentional rest gives you the opportunity to examine those words. It allows you to replace exaggerated narratives with balanced truth. Instead of everything will collapse, you begin to say, I will handle what comes. Instead of I cannot manage this, you begin to say, I have managed before. Rest creates the conditions for spiritual grounding. In silence, you become more aware of divine presence. You realize that you are not navigating life alone. That awareness reduces isolation. Isolation intensifies anxiety. Connection reduces it. When you intentionally step away from noise and reconnect spiritually, you reinforce trust. Trust is incompatible with chronic panic. There is also a discipline required to maintain authority over anxiety. It is not a one-time decision. It is a repeated practice. Each day offers opportunities to surrender to racing thoughts or to regulate them. Each moment of stress invites you to either escalate internally or to pause. Intentional rest becomes a habit. Habits shape outcomes. When you rest intentionally, you begin to recognize triggers. You notice which conversations elevate tension. You observe which environments drain you. You become aware of patterns that increase restlessness. Awareness gives you choice. Choice reinforces authority. Instead of being surprised by anxiety, you anticipate and manage it. Authority over anxiety does not mean you never feel concern. It means concern does not control you. It means you can experience stress without spiraling. It means you can acknowledge uncertainty without losing stability. Intentional rest builds that resilience. It strengthens your capacity to remain composed under pressure. Over time, intentional rest transforms your posture. You move more slowly, but with greater clarity. You speak more deliberately. You respond rather than react. Your presence becomes calmer. Others notice steadiness in you. That steadiness is not accidental, it is cultivated. It is the result of choosing rest when anxiety demanded frenzy. Anxiety loses influence when it no longer dictates your schedule. If your day is structured around avoiding discomfort, anxiety leads. But when you incorporate intentional pauses, reflection, and restoration, you reclaim leadership over your time. You demonstrate that your internal state will not be governed by fear. Authority begins internally before it manifests externally. When you master your thoughts, regulate your body, and ground your spirit, external challenges lose some of their intensity. You see options instead of obstacles. You evaluate risk without exaggeration. You maintain composure when others panic. Intentional rest is the gateway to that mastery. It is the practice that strengthens your mind, steadies your body, and centers your spirit. Each moment of deliberate stillness reinforces your authority. Each pause weakens anxiety's dominance. Each breath taken slowly becomes a declaration that fear does not rule here, that peace is cultivated, that clarity is chosen, and that authority over anxiety begins with intentional rest. Rest today determines your strength for tomorrow's victory. What you do in moments of pause shapes how you will perform in moments of pressure. Strength is not manufactured in crisis, it is cultivated in preparation. Many people wait until they are confronted with challenge before considering their capacity, but capacity is built long before it is tested. The discipline of rest is not about comfort, it is about readiness. Tomorrow's victory will require clarity. Clarity is sharpened in stillness. When your mind is constantly overloaded, your ability to discern weakens. You make reactive decisions. You misinterpret signals. You overlook subtle instructions. But when you rest intentionally, your thoughts reorganize, mental clutter settles, insight surfaces, you begin to see patterns you previously missed. That clarity becomes a strategic advantage when challenges arise. Victory also requires endurance. Endurance is not the product of adrenaline. It is the result of sustainable rhythm. Adrenaline gives short bursts of energy, but it depletes quickly. Sustainable strength comes from cycles of exertion and recovery. When you deny yourself rest, you compromise endurance. You may perform well briefly, but fatigue accumulates beneath the surface. Eventually, it manifests as irritability, poor judgment, or emotional instability. Rest today replenishes the reserves you will draw from tomorrow. It restores physical energy. It stabilizes emotional balance. It strengthens spiritual confidence. When the next assignment presents itself, you approach it with steadiness rather than strain. You are not scrambling to gather strength. You are operating from stored resilience. Many underestimate the strategic value of preparation. They focus on visible action but neglect invisible renewal. Yet unseen preparation often determines visible outcome. The athlete who trains consistently performs confidently. The leader who reflects regularly responds wisely. The individual who rests intentionally reacts calmly under pressure. Preparation builds predictability in your performance. Rest also strengthens perception. Fatigue distorts interpretation. When you are exhausted, small obstacles appear larger than they are. Minor disagreements feel like major conflicts. Simple tasks feel overwhelming. Rest recalibrates proportion. It allows you to evaluate situations accurately. That accuracy protects you from overreacting or underestimating challenges. Tomorrow's victory may not look like dramatic triumph. It may look like composed decision-making in a tense moment. It may look like maintaining patience when provoked. It may look like choosing strategy over impulse. Those responses require internal strength. Internal strength is reinforced through restoration. There is a connection between rest and confidence. When you are well rested, your thoughts are clearer. Your posture is steadier. Your reactions are measured. Confidence is not arrogance, it is stability. It is the quiet assurance that you can handle what arises. That assurance grows when your body is nourished, your mind is clear, and your spirit is grounded. Rest also protects creativity. Innovation rarely emerges from exhaustion. Creativity requires space. It requires mental margin. When your schedule is overloaded and your attention fragmented, creative thought diminishes. But when you rest, imagination returns. Solutions appear. Strategies form. Victory often depends on creative adaptation. Rest nurtures that capacity. Emotional regulation is another dimension of strength. Under pressure, unregulated emotions can sabotage progress. Anger escalates conflict. Fear delays action. Impatience disrupts timing. Rest supports regulation. It lowers baseline stress. It increases tolerance for discomfort. It allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Spiritual resilience is also cultivated in seasons of rest. When you pause, you reconnect with purpose. You realign with values. You reaffirm identity. That alignment becomes an anchor when uncertainty arises. Without that anchor, external circumstances can easily destabilize you. With it, you remain centered. Tomorrow's victory may require collaboration. Collaboration requires patience, listening, and flexibility. Exhaustion reduces all three. When you are depleted, you become less tolerant of difference. You rush conversations. You misinterpret tone. Rest enhances relational capacity. It sharpens listening. It increases empathy. It strengthens communication. Physical vitality cannot be ignored. Strength is not solely mental or spiritual. Your body carries you through every task. When it is neglected, performance declines. Sleep restores muscle tissue. It balances hormones. It consolidates memory. Hydration supports cognitive function. Nourishment fuels sustained energy. These physical aspects of rest directly influence your effectiveness. Rest today also guards against burnout tomorrow. Burnout is not caused by a single demanding day. It is the accumulation of neglected restoration. It develops when output consistently exceeds input. By prioritizing rest, you maintain equilibrium. You ensure that your investment of energy is matched by replenishment. Discipline in rest requires foresight. It requires you to value long-term impact over short-term productivity. It asks you to step back even when tasks remain unfinished. It invites you to trust that pausing will enhance performance rather than diminish it. That trust is strategic. It acknowledges that strength is cyclical. When you rest, you strengthen your ability to tolerate uncertainty. Fatigue amplifies doubt. It magnifies risk. It narrows perspective. Rest widens perspective. It allows you to see beyond immediate discomfort. It equips you to endure temporary challenge without losing long-term vision. Strength for tomorrow is not only about overcoming obstacles, it is about sustaining progress. Sustained progress requires rhythm. It requires knowing when to push and when to pause. It requires humility to acknowledge limits. It requires wisdom to prioritize renewal. Rest also builds self-trust. When you honor your need for restoration, you reinforce the belief that you are worthy of care. That belief influences how you approach opportunity. You no longer operate from desperation, you move from stability. Stability enhances decision-making. Victory often belongs to those who remain composed when others panic. Composure is built in quiet moments. It is reinforced when you choose rest instead of constant urgency. It is strengthened when you cultivate peace intentionally. Tomorrow will present opportunities and challenges that you cannot fully predict, but your preparation is within your control. The quality of your rest influences the quality of your response. The depth of your restoration influences the durability of your strength. The intention you apply to today's pause shapes the authority you carry into tomorrow's engagement, because rest today determines your strength for tomorrow's victory.